Hi, everyone. Welcome to the Suffolk Legal Innovation and Technology Lab's first Wednesday workshops for the document assembly line community. These workshops are a chance to dive deeper into topics related to building guided interviews with Docassemble using the document assembly line tools. Today's topic is Docassemble snapshots, and our expert guests are Emily Kress-Miller, Vivian McNaughton, and Matt Newsted. I'll ask them to introduce themselves in a minute. First, this workshop's being recorded, and we will share it on our YouTube channel. To find it, just check our blog on suffolklitlab.org or search for Suffolk Lit Lab on YouTube. If you're participating live on Zoom, please use the chat to ask questions. I'll call attention to them to our guests as we go. Your video can be disabled or not, it's up to you. But since it often helps to share your screen to demonstrate a problem, you can do that. Just wait till we invite you if it's necessary to the question you have. Before we dive in, if you're hearing about the Lit Lab or the document assembly line for the first time, head over to suffolklitlab.org to learn more. Everyone who uses Docassemble and the document assembly tools is welcome to attend our weekly community meetings, join our community forum on Microsoft Teams, and attend these workshops. If you'd like to join us, just email us at litlab@suffolk.edu. And just a programming note here, in the very near future, I think we're going to be able to offer some special sessions for brand new interview builders, folks who are new to Docassemble. If you want to know about that, go to our website, suffolklitlab.org, and sign up for our email newsletter, or look for, well, any other way to sign up, but that we'll send the notifications out on those channels. I'm sure we'll put it on our blog too, so check back there. Okay, let's get started. I'm going to ask our guests to introduce themselves. Emily, how about you first, then Vivian, and then Matt?
Hi, I'm Emily Kress-Miller. I'm a staff attorney at Michigan Legal Help, but spending most of my time these days working on our Docassemble interviews. Any pronouns are good for me.
Thank you. Vivian?
Hi, my name is Vivian McNaughton. I work at Illinois Legal Aid Online as a document assembly specialist. I work alongside Matt Newsted, who you will also hear from, and my pronouns are she, her.
All right, Matt.
Hey everyone, I'm Matt Newsted. I use he, him, his pronouns. As Vivian mentioned, I am also at Illinois Legal Aid Online, also known as ILEO. And I on the content team with Vivian doing a document assembly.
Cool, welcome. I'm glad you pronounced Leo. I spent the first couple of weeks working for the Lit Lab, not being sure, so it was helpful to have that. So today we're going to talk about snapshots. Maybe one of you could just, or all of you can offer, what are they? What do they do? What can they be used for?
Well, I can jump in. A snapshot is a way that in a Docassemble interview, you can keep track of the specific state of the answer file, that is the user's answers, and see what responses they are given. So, for example, I often in the program's easy forms that I make for Aleo, I will often have the program snapshot the county that users are listing as their residence or where they are filing in order to help get a sense of where in the state of Illinois our users are coming from. And it can be much more versatile than that. You're able to keep track of a fair number of variables, and you're also able to make a snapshot of the interview at different points in the interview. What we often do at Aleo is we will have a starting snapshot and a finishing snapshot. And the reason we do that is so we can tell how many users who start our program are actually making it to the end of the program. So we can see what sort of retention that we're having throughout the interview process.
Emily, are you doing more or less the same thing, or are you using snapshots for other things too?
Pretty similar. Our code, basically, we stole from ILEO and then adapted, I think. Two other things that we're gathering. We have it set up to tell us how many forms generate for users who do complete the interview, because that's just a statistic we've reported in the past. So we wanted to be able to track, and the number of forms might, in some cases, will be different depending on the path through the interview. So we're tracking that routinely. And then also one thing we're interested in is learning more about is how often domestic violence is present in cases, for example. So we're in one of our interviews right now, we're also tracking, you know, whether the user answered that there was or was not domestic violence present.
Anything to add, Matt?
Yeah, one other purpose we found, or one way we use the snapshots that helps us, is some of the programs we make maybe will produce different kinds of forms, and we can track which type of form was created by it when you get to the end, where you might not be able to tell just based on the number of forms or that they finished it, but we can say, oh, you used our motion program to make a generic motion, or oh, you used it to extend a deadline, or you wanted to continue a court date. So we can now keep track of that at the end and say, oh, this is what people are doing. Another thing we were really interested in, Vivian did a name change for a child or children program, and we had snapshots in there, and we just capture, so how many children at once are you including on your petition for a name change? Because the forms and our programming, we could, I don't know, I forgot if we capped it or if we said you could go to infinity. Well, we probably capped it, but at some point we were just trying to get a sense of how many people do they usually ask? Yeah, and one last thing. One of the benefits of this is that it will produce, the snapshot data can be downloaded into an Excel spreadsheet, so it makes using it very easy if you want to do reports, and it actually can be accessed via API as well. We have not looked into that, but we're going to do that because I think we're going to pull it into some Tableau visualizations and things like that. So there are advanced ways you can get at all that data fairly easily, because Google Analytics or other tracking can provide some information, but this can be more targeted.
Oh, okay. I would love to see how this looks on the Docassemble side of things. Is somebody able to show us how to set it up and then what the output looks like, what the inputs and outputs look like, how it works? Anyone who has it open, I guess.
Yeah, I have, oh, go ahead, Emily.
Oh, you can go ahead.
I was gonna say, I have a YAML in the playground open that I can show an example of, but I'd have to dig up the actual data and where that is sent.
I'd love to
I don't
start
have
with
that
that.
open.
See how do you set it up and what does that look like?
Yeah, and I have the data, so we can pull that. So you just focus on
Perfect.
the YAML first.
Let me make sure that I'm sharing the correct screen. I am. So this is our transfer on death instrument program. Are you able to see the window okay?
Yep.
I can
Loud and
zoom
clear.
in some.
Bright and clear.
Okay, perfect. So this is the code block where we are collecting what we call stuff to snapshot. So this program includes, since it doesn't ask about a specific county, as I recall correctly, we're asking about the zip code to learn the locations of people who are filing. And then this, I guess I'm getting a little bit ahead of myself. So we start with this object here. So we have the stuff to snapshot equals, we include the start time just to keep track of when this is being snapped, when the shot is being snapped, and flagging that the interview has started. And it will try and snapshot an IP address if it can, otherwise it will pass. And then this is where we change things from these are the variables that we track that can vary from program to program. So what we usually always do is have user zip or, filing county to keep track of where our users are. This is forms assembling. This is the variable we are using to track if the interview has been completed. If you look here, forms assembling is the last variable called before this snapshot forms code block here, which reconsiders the snapshot state. And so that is just so this forms assembling is just a continue button field that is used for a screen that says, please wait while your forms assemble before moving on. And then so
The stuff to snapshot is an object, and you're setting the keys on the left side of the equal sign so that you're using like user_zip is always a zip code in every interview that you use snapshots in, so that your data is even. Am I getting that right?
Yeah, so user zip we should only be using that for the zip code. And so the variable on the left next to stuff to snapshot in brackets, that is what the variable will be called in the output of the snapshot. And then so the variable here is the variable that is used in the specific easy form. And so those don't necessarily have to have the same title. As you can see, a couple of them here, such as other owners check, I use the same title for both. But this is just either returning the value of the variable if defined, or nothing or none if not. And here, the variables we are tracking pertain to some different pathways within the interview. Other owners check is checking to see if a user is trying to create a transfer on death instrument for a property that they co-own rather than own exclusively. And so that is so we can get a sense of how many of our users are creating toadies for properties they own alone or for properties that they own with other people. So we can have a better understanding of how much we need to prioritize the functionality of, the more complicated functionality of dealing with multiple co-owners if we want to expand that functionality because a large number of our users prove to be using it, or if we feel the functionality we do have is adequate because a small number of our users are going down that pathway. And there are various other variables from different programs that we will keep track of. And then we have this store variable snapshot, which is, I should, Matt, do you remember offhand what this does?
Yeah, so this is what will put the data into the table. That persistent equal true argument is important because that will then write it to the same line if you are taking multiple snapshots during the course of a session. So we want to take a snapshot at the beginning, get the start time. We don't have the values of any variables yet. And then we run it again. We want to say, oh, this time when the user started 10 minutes ago, same row. Now we know the value of a bunch of these variables, so we'll put them in there. That's what this is doing.
So persistent is true says we're going to keep it on one line of the output, and we want to just keep every time we update it, we want to update all the variables with new information.
Yes.
If there's new information. Okay, I got it.
And then so snapshot interview state true, this is the variable we're using to call this code block. And we don't actually call this variable in our mandatory interview code block here. Instead, it is called in these two code blocks. This first one just calls that variable and then defines snapshot start. And the snapshot start is the variable we call in our mandatory interview order code block. I should note that an interview order code block is not a necessity for Docassemble. It's just how we have taken to structuring our interviews. And then there is another call to this code block, snapshot forms, which is the one called near the end of the interview, and that tells the program to reconsider the value of snapshot interview state. The reconsider is important because if it is not to be reconsidered, it'll just presume the program will just know that it is already defined and not bother running this this snapshot interview state code block anew. So this is a quick overview of the snapshot code and the YAML. Matt or Emily, I'm curious if there's anything that I skipped over that you would like to flag, because I feel like
I have a quick question. You said that
Yes.
you use it, for example, to track the start, who makes it to the end of the interview. So do you have to call it again at the end of the interview to how do you get those two separate times?
Yes, so we call it 2 times. So if I look at this interview order code block, so immediately after our start page, which is called with the C's nav bar, we call the snapshot start code block. That code block is here, and all that code block does is it itself calls the snapshot interview state code block, which is this code block that does the bulk of the work for the snapshotting. And then once the user gets through all of these various variables, all these questions, etc., and it's getting towards the
Oh, I
end,
see.
yeah, and they hit the snapshot forms variable that calls this code block, which reconsiders snapshot interview state, which calls this code block again. So if you want to have a snapshot for both the start and the end of the interview, you will need to do something like this, where you're making sure that object you are using to track the variables for snapshotting is reconsidered the second time that you want to take the snapshot.
If you're capturing it all in one line, maybe I missed this too, but if you're capturing it on all on one line of a spreadsheet, for example, how does it does it have a timestamp at the beginning and a timestamp at the end, or does that work?
Should have the timestamp for both snapshots, the beginning and end ones, because
Okay.
is that the correct amount? Because this variable is called start time, but if I recall correctly, it just is catching the time each time that this code block is run.
Yeah, I believe every time the row is written to or updated, there's a mod time field that's automatically added. Well, you'll see that when we open up one of
Okay, cool.
those results. Yeah. I had a couple other things I wanted to say about this if you're done, Vivian.
Yes, would you like me to keep sharing the screen, or?
Oh, sure, you can if you want. Just to let everybody know, we're not collecting IP addresses because we're trying to harvest anyone's data or things like that. We're actually using that because we've noticed that this snapshotting, while more accurate than other usage tracking tools, sometimes can produce duplicates and things like that. And so we're now starting, because we've seen the same information appear multiple times, and sometimes the IP address can be used to help us see, oh, this same IP address, same start time, or very close. So maybe a page refreshed and it started a new session, wrote a new row. So we're looking at it in that regard. It's to try to make sure that our usage numbers are more accurate. On the other hand, it's also important because a number of our users are, say it's at a law library or legal self-help center, or advocates that are using it. And maybe it's one person sitting at a computer using it hundreds of times in a month, or even in an evening. And so they've 100 times, but using it multiple times. This way we can check, like, oh, from this IP address, there have been 10 uses of the program over this evening or this kind of time. And we can say, even though it's the same IP address, it's kind of close in time, it's far enough apart that we can tell it's a different user if we couldn't tell from the other data. So all that is to say, we're still working on trying to use this so it can give us the most realistic picture of usage. But we're, it's the data is anonymized. We're not capturing people's names. So but we do have IP address, which sometimes is kind of personal, but it's like the
The
other
semi-unique
interview
identifier.
data. Yeah, but it's protected the same way other user data and answers are on the server.
Gotcha.
The other thing I wanted to say, Emily mentioned copying Aleo's code. Aleo did not come up with this code on her own. We copied it from Suffolk LIT Lab. So you all should deserve the credit for starting it, creating it. We just modified it, but that's how much of a code in the world is written.
It's the beauty of an open source community. Chris asks if you mentioned this in the terms of use, your terms of use.
Yes, we do. We have it broadly in our terms of use and privacy policies about how we will collect certain user data to improve the functionality of our website and things like that. But that's, yeah, so we have it mentioned there.
Okay. Emily, how are you doing the exact same thing, or have you made some changes to how you use it, or?
A little bit different. I can just quickly show.
It's always nice to see two different variations on similar code as well. So
Yeah. I mean, one just difference from the example Vivian showed is that ours, because right now we're really snapshotting the same things. We haven't done a ton of customization for specific interviews yet. So I put the background code kind of in our framework. So this is a change of domicile motion example. And there's just a little bit of code that's in here for a couple of variables, and that same like snapshot start, snapshot download are our kind of beginning and ending calls. But then the rest of it's in our framework. And it uses a pretty similar where it starts out with stuff to snapshot at the beginning, just being the beginning time. And then at the end, it adds the zip code, the number of forms. I do have an in timestamp because I think I was trying to get it to come out with a similar output. Whereas I think at least when I was playing around with mod time was coming out a little different and it was driving me nuts. So I wanted it to come out with the same, I wanted the date and time to come out the same way for the beginning and the end. So I do have a specific in timestamp. And yeah, we just have this DV question. But otherwise it works very similarly to what Vivian explained.
So to one or all of you, how do you access this? What does it look like on the other end? And what do you do with it, I guess?
Yeah, I'm happy to show how we access it and use it if
Great.
that's all right.
Please.
Right. So here we go. So we have the AL assembly line dashboard installed on our server. And that will get us to let us access this usage stats page. To use this, there is a separate package called interview stats, which takes advantage, or has some additional usability tools and functionality so that you can get at all that snapshot data in a better way. So those are the two things you could use to get to it. There's probably other ways to get at it. I'm not sure, but this is how we do it. So we'll go into AL dashboard, click on usage stats, and then it asks which interview do you want to view statistics for. And this list here, these are all the programs we have installed on our server that have generated some snapshot data. So I can click on anyone. So I can go to this one, the Toady that Vivian just talked about. You can click on that and continue. It gives this high level information about how many sessions it's collected for, first and last. And then it gets into a little bit deeper data. So now here, these are like some, kind of like a mini dashboard, but these are just summary panes for the different data. This is kind of, and you can switch the information or like what column you're looking at by clicking on different things here. This is, I don't know, I find this not the easiest to read all the time based on how we've set things up. So I generally just ignore all that, go to, oh, why is it? Anyway, yeah, if you go to it, I think this one we'll start with. Anyway, from here, you can just click download to get that spreadsheet I was talking about. And it'll generate a spreadsheet. Go ahead and hit download. Open it up when it's ready.
And you're not sharing your Excel with us. We're still looking at the browser.
I think it's, no, it's for the whole screen. I'm sorry, it came up behind it.
Gotcha.
Sometimes Excel does that. Anyway, okay, so here's all the data. First thing I do is I select all the fields, maximize their width. Okay. So these are, you'll see a combination of the fields that Vivian identified are in the snapshot code block: user zip, IP address, start time, and then these are some of those custom fields that we've talked about. And then here, this mod time, this is the one that's auto-generated. And as Emily pointed out, this is in a different format than start time. I kind of, now that we've been doing this for a while, I kind of feel like we should have it might be easier to use just this mod time format everywhere for both dates, because now we're going to have 2 Julys and it's just going to get a little bit messier. But anyway, that's a data cleanup issue. But this is great because now we can see all the information that we gathered, and you can run, I would typically use this to say, I would take out a section or just say, oh, show me the usage in this period, and then I'll just do count if, so I can say how many people have used the program in a certain period. So like
when I see one, when it doesn't have a zip code, it doesn't have a tenancy type, doesn't have download forms, I mean, that means somebody abandoned the interview, right?
That is our understanding, yes.
Okay.
Although you'll see, and sometimes it doesn't always. So like here's something that's just curious. This, what we would think should be on the same row, because this looks like the same person started at 8:46 p.m., finished at 9:30. And so I would think this should be on the same row. So we have a TIG. We're going to be hiring an evaluator to help us look at this and Google Analytics and try to find the best way to get to the most accurate tracking. But yes, that's how we've been using it right now, is that if there's an incomplete row with a start time and no downloaded forms, field set to true, then we think, oh, that it was not finished. But so this is a case where this might look like this could be double counted, because it's really just one person who started and finished, not 2 people who started and 1 person who finished. So that's how I use the data. One other thing I wanted to mention.
So what Matt, for you particularly, and I guess I'd love to hear Emily as well, like what are some, I assume part of the reason is for reporting statistics, like here's how many, and so like what are some of the statistics that you guys capture and then talk about with the administration, with grantors, with whoever you're sharing the statistics with? What are the stats that you collect, and what do they tell you about your interviews?
At the most basic level, we try to report on how many people used one of our easy form programs and then how many of them completed it. So that just user starts and user downloads. And we can also then look at how that compares with other programs. other form sets. But we can also compare it to like the same form set on a different platform. So we've used this in other cases to say, oh, look at when we have this program running in Docassemble, we have a 60% completion rate. When we run it in on another platform, there's only a 40% completion rate. Now, not being able to complete is not, it doesn't mean that the program wasn't successful, because sometimes there are kickouts questions in the interview and they're properly diverting people away from it. It's not just that this program is boring or I don't like this font or whatever it is, so it's just been abandoned. It may be a case where the form is not right for them. So that's generally how we use it. But we can also, if we're applying for a grant that is a little more targeted, say that's maybe just focus on one county or a few counties, we can use that zip code data to say, hey, look at, we now know that this many people are using our program to get this kind of help. We'd like to expand it or modify it or things like that. So it can, those are some ways we use that snapshot data.
Yeah, and I think ours is similar. We want to know if people are completing the interview, although as Matt pointed out, there's some caveats there, and especially when you try to compare it to another platform, I think it gets really tricky to make sure you're actually comparing like apples to apples. We were really interested in the zip code. I think that's something we have had we had difficulty accessing in the past on other platforms, and so to be able to say like are certain areas of the state being underserved, I think is something we're interested in starting to look at more, to just see where our reach is in the state and if it's kind of mapping the population that we think we should be reaching. Yeah, and then right now, really the only sort of content specific question we have is that one about domestic violence, you know, and I can't remember why that, I think that was just like something that the courts were interested in, or I can't remember why that specifically we wanted to track that, but yeah, just being able to learn more about how people are using our forms and what kind of fact patterns they're bringing, and therefore how we should maybe shift things or focus our attention.
Gotcha. Emily, your reports look pretty similar to the ones that Matt was just showing us, I assume?
Yeah, I could show one real quick if you want.
Yeah, I'd love to see
similar.
it. Yeah.
With the caveat, this is cleaned up a little bit. This is like the cleaned up version. But again, you can see there's the empty rows where we think that the presumption is that the person didn't finish, didn't make it all the way to that download point where we take the second snapshot. And then for the ones where they did make it to that point, we have the data. So pretty similar.
Very cool. What other things can snapshots be used for? Is it primarily for stats, or is that there? When I was looking at the Docassemble documentation, it wasn't obvious to me that they were meant to be used for stats. But maybe that was just me not reading closely enough.
I mean, that's the context in which I learned about them. So that's kind of
Gotcha.
how I've thought about them. Yeah.
Makes sense to me. That's really helpful. Thanks. Sorry, Matt, I totally interrupted you.
No, you didn't. But I was just thinking that there likely are other uses for this data, but we also haven't encountered them. It can be used, like I talked about a little bit earlier, to better understand what the user population is doing with the program, which branches they're going down. You could even use it as a troubleshooting tool if you wanted to see where people are getting hung up on. If you really feel like there's a place where people are getting to a certain point and then you're seeing a big drop off. So you could add in snapshots throughout to really track it if you wanted to get granular with all the data.
Gotcha. Quentin points out you can store anything that might be easier to analyze than the raw Python variables. It feels like you could use this creatively to do different things, but I'm not sure exactly what. Well, do folks have other questions? Or Quentin, did you want to chime in with some other uses you've seen? If so, great.
Yeah. Well, so
yeah, go ahead.
we use it to like tag a variable, a session with some kind of extra metadata that you might want to use. So as like a consultant, I was working with someone who wanted to basically build a white label framework for their interviews. So like they want to sell it to lawyers and then let the lawyers see the data just about the people who were their customers. So, but all on one server. And we could use the snapshot data to store kind of like a code that's associated with each session that's easy to look up and group the sessions better. Anything like that you could do. It's not that different from the statistics use case, but it's just, in that case, what's important is for each individual session, who does it belong to rather than the aggregate data.
Very cool.
Yeah, related to that is, I forgot that Quentin has helped us with this, and Jim too. We have a program that's being used in a clinic setting, and it was so successful in this one setting, they are now using it in a variety of branches, different offices throughout the state. And so we've added in a question and say, oh, which office are you using? And then we're snapshotting that data. So now we can more easily determine, oh, so this office used the program this many times, and this office did this many times. So yeah, it's similar to the tagging to certain people or things like that. And it's related to statistics again, but it is an easy way to generate and capture that metadata.
Chris wants to ask a quick question about your stats. Yeah, go ahead and unmute yourself and ask away.
Okay. I put a little picture of them in the chat. Basically, I only collect a snapshot once, and I have it in between my basic question signature flow where I collect the signature, and I have it right before the divorce download screen. So it's sandwiched in there. So what does it mean when I have those lines that don't have other information? Does that mean they got to the end of the interview and just didn't download, or is it always spitting out the start of somebody's session?
I don't have the answers, so somebody else is going to have to chime in.
Do you have like a snapshot at the big, how's yours set up, Chris? Is there like a snapshot at the beginning and then the end?
Nope, just one snapshot, and it's at the very end in between the signature and the divorce download screen. So potentially, I guess they signed and then didn't go further. But that really doesn't make sense because I get a lot of these. I just have never understood why some of these lines don't have information.
Yeah, it seems like it's not what I would expect either. So I guess I would be, wanting to like look at the code and play around with it.
Yeah, no worries. I just wondered if somebody knew that, like, does Docassemble always collect a starting time, or should that not be the case?
I think it should be collecting the starting time. That's one of the things that's just automatically saved.
Okay.
But
so maybe that's what those rows are?
Only if you run the snapshot, though. So yeah, it's interesting. I guess it would, like, Emily would have to just see the exact place where you were calling it. Maybe it's called the time that you didn't realize, or maybe it has to run that block twice, and the first time was a question that wasn't asked, so it's storing that row twice as well.
Okay. Yeah, no worries.
I also, this is probably not relevant, but one thing when working with, when like trying to set these up, especially at the beginning, that, it just keeps showing you the earlier versions of your snapshot. So if you like change the snapshot code and then run it again, then like it doesn't, then it, I don't know, just like, so if you had run this at an earlier point where it didn't have the extra stuff added, then you could potentially have some rows that just didn't have as much information in them.
Yeah.
For
so
that
in the
reason?
past, yeah, okay.
Yeah,
Thank you.
that's a really, really good point.
Well, thanks so much, everyone. I really appreciate your input. And I guess we're done for today, and we'll see y'all next month. Thanks so much, Matt, Vivian, Emily, Quentin for chiming in, Chris for your questions. Hope to see you again.